Right, I think we'll begin. So good afternoon, everybody. This is Claire Fenello from EVCOM, and welcome to our first webinar of the year. The webinar rather, sorry, it's been so long since I've said it. The webinar for January is the televisation of events, and we have a fabulous panel lined up. Before we get into that, can I just flag a few things, which is my normal process. So just to give a bit of a sales pitch to the next webinar, which is in February 10th. That is in fact called the State of Webinars and will be delivered by 23, who will be reviewing their report into webinars and how to develop a webinar strategy. So they're looking at moving the whole thing forward and helping you with that. And then on the 2nd of February, just to flag, we have the launch of the Clarion Awards, which are EVCOM's awards program that recognises excellence across cause-driven corporate and brand film, live events and experiences. So that's, we're launching that a little earlier this year. So I really wanted to flag that for those of you who do enter on a regular basis, but there will obviously be comms going out about that. And as usual, could we ask that you put any questions in the chat, and we'll be reviewing those as we go along, and depending on how we go, we'll either weave them into the conversation or try and look at some of them towards the end. But if possible, we'll try and address them as we go. We usually are able to make the webinar recording available from about lunchtime tomorrow. So you'll be able to review it then, and by then we'll be able to have attached all the resources and any other interesting bits of information that the speakers provide and are happy to share. So that will be available after lunch tomorrow. Right, so without any further ado, we'll get on with the show, the televisation of events. We're delighted to welcome Phil McMichael, who is the CEO and co-founder of JL Live, giving us a wave, thank you. Matt Franks is Director of Events at DRP. And we have Adrian Dickson, who is CEO and founder of Starstruck.
Afternoon.
And Nick Rosier, who is Content and Digital Director at Two Heads.
Hello. Hi.
Hi. So thank you all very much for joining us. And what I am going to ask that we do to kick it off is if we could go round, we'll start with Phil. And then go Adrian, Matt, Nick. Just to ask the question, what is your relationship to broadcasting and the televisation of events? And that will give us some context as to who you all are and what you do.
Fabulous, thank you, Claire. So JL Live, we are a relatively new business to the industry. We're sort of born in the autumn of 2020, mid-pandemic, as you do. Really born out of kind of the ashes of the commercial team that was at Blitz and married with the kind of the diversification of a television production company called JL Lighting, with a credit list of the likes of Top Gear and Comic Relief and QI Beat Chasers and the Christmas Top of the Pops and Blankety Blank. We have a full palette of madness. But what that means, and we believe, is kind of where we're at now in terms of kind of entering what we see as a golden age, a roaring 20s ahead of us, where agencies and corporate filmmakers, EVCOM essentially, are more than are really the essential driver as we move forward. We need to collectively handhold our brands. We need to take them in new creative directions. We need to help them understand and hold their hands as they need to really think about events as becoming much more, experiences. And I know we've used that many times, but now we're dealing with a more virtual audience. And in reality, the way we see it from a television perspective, I want us to start getting away from the narrative of delegates. Ultimately, what you're doing is you're creating an event, if it is in the virtual space, for a small screen audience. A small screen audience has consumed small screen content in a particular way for 70 years. And it isn't the way that events have delivered the filming of a keynote with a camera at the back of the room. So, we are really excited to be part of EVCOM. We're really excited to kind of help agencies and corporate filmmakers really accelerate as we drive into this kind of roaring 20s that we genuinely believe is ahead of us. It's an exciting time and a great time to be part of EVCOM. So thanks for having me along.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Phil. You make it sound thrilling. Adrian, and can we hear from you next, please?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I'd like to second what Phil says. I think it's sort of a glorious time ahead because everything seems to be converging. From our point of view, we started as a broadcast indie. We made TV shows. We got commissioned by the broadcasters. We turned in a half an hour. It got broadcast. And then as time went on, as the social internet developed, we did a lot more online content, as it was called then, and kind of organic marketing, something that wasn't a TV commercial. And we basically crashed into brand that way. And I think brands liked us because we brought that little bit of Hollywood glamour, a little bit of glitz, a little bit of, that television way of thinking, rather than it's all about the tagline. It's all about, it's got to be, there in 30 seconds. And from that, we got into events quite swiftly because events for us made a lot of sense because it was like a TV show experience. And so therefore it would make sense for us to then do, a pop-up or maybe cover an event, or I want to be polite when I say this, but something that might have been quite dour beforehand, shot by an AV team. Just put a little bit of punch into it and maybe sort of a bit of televisual magic into it, and give everyone a good experience who was watching at home. So I think, as Phil mentioned, yes, this decade could now be the, even more blending of two different areas, broadcast and brand perhaps, or experience and brand, or less of that corporate film and more of like, well, hang on, I've got to entertain the audience who are more likely to be at home now. So I think that's where our expertise has really benefited us to really kick things up a notch with every project we do. So thank you, EVCOM, for allowing us to be on this panel today.
Thanks so much, Adrian. Right, we shall go on now to Matt, please.
Great. Hello, everyone. So DRPG started 40 years ago in film, and it was founded by our CEO, Dale, who was out shooting weddings, and then it progressed, and we've evolved into a creative communications agency, and actually that's ever present now, and echoing what Adrian's just said around less looking at audiences, it's now a blend of content to engage specifically with a group of people, regardless whether that's in external or internal communications. I think we were very fortunate that we had media and in the form of digital and film already set up and established here as entities, and then our live events offering, which is around 50 to 60% of the business. So it was a significant impact for us with COVID, as with many. And what we've been able to do is pull on all those resources to find a new way forward. And I think it's a super exciting time because we're able to engage with audiences differently. We're able to challenge ourselves, and at the back of it, we'll see something different. We're definitely pushing for the return of live events in some way, shape or form. And as being director of live, that's certainly where my passion is. But seeing the benefits of virtual and hybrid coming together will give us extended reach and will have a bigger impact on communications as a whole. And I think also driving behind all of this is sustainability, which would be amiss of us not to mention, but it's certainly going to be what pushes us forward as well in terms of whatever live looks like in the future. So yes, thank you very much for having me today, and hopefully we can provide some insight in our journey.
Great, thanks Matt. And then over to you, Nick, for the last word on this one.
Sure, yeah. Well, again, yeah, thanks for having me in. And it's good to be part of EVCOM, as it was said. So two heads. Who are two heads? We've been around for about 36 years, just behind you, Matt. And we started out as a sort of a stand builder, literally man in a van sort of situation, so small scale. And over the sort of ensuing 30 odd years, I've turned into a number of things, but basically now are a full service experiential agency. So we're focused on creating meaningful brand experiences. That typically has been in the real world. So we'll do, 200 odd events across 40 odd countries in a typical year. With COVID, that changed hugely, as you mentioned, Matt. And so now we're sort of heavily looking into, okay, how can we sort of take a virtual offering and build out virtual events, but also in the future, because, the lockdowns and all that sort of stuff won't last forever. What does that look like? What does a hybrid future look like? So some of the key things that we've done are to build our own virtual events platform, Event Hive VX. which has been rolled out to a number of brands now, and sort of creating more of a bespoke sort of custom experience for online events, moving away from the sort of cookie cutter stuff you might get from your On24s or Air Meets, for example, into, okay, as an agency, what kind of a creative kind of touch can we put onto presenting live broadcasted content, live event material in an online space? So that's two heads, and we're B2B largely. So our clients sit across aerospace, across media. We do a lot of gaming stuff, and we're also involved in some theme parks as well. So there's a real sort of mix. So thanks again.
Theme parks, right? Okay, well that sounds like fun. So I suppose one of the first questions I would like to ask is, everyone talks about, I think Phil mentioned the word magic. And Adrian mentioned glamour and glitz. What makes a great broadcast or televised event? So what sets it apart from other content being produced in virtual and hybrid space? So what are the elements that people need to be thinking about that make something more of a broadcast? We'll go in the same order again, shall we, at this point? Phil?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things to look at here. One is sort of the narrative of what the industry traditionally has said, and I think we got to look at the term event itself, and maybe we start saying, actually, well, the event element is the centerpiece of a much wider marketing campaign where you become part of a bigger digital platform, and we'll talk about budgets later. But as far as that's concerned, with the live element or the virtual live element, it's really about the pace. It's about the variety, and it's about moving away from trying to replicate a live event experience and death by 27 PowerPoints on a green screen into becoming something that's educational, something that's entertaining. It's about thinking about how you can vary the content, and I think we've got to start looking at changing it from having 7-8 hours of people sat at home in front of a screen, breaking it into 30-minute, 45-minute shows that may well have some pre-recorded content. They may have some documentary element to it. It might be a bit of a Graham Norton chat show. There's all sorts of ways of curating it, but I think it's fundamentally the difference between a live event and a really exciting virtual event or broadcast show rather is the pace and the variety. And that's the big change that people need to think about.
Okay, sorry, before we go to you, Adrian, can I just ask then, Nick, you talk about the building of virtual platforms. Will they enable that kind of broadcast standard delivery, or is that an entirely different thing?
It will. So it's a good question. What does VX do, I guess? There's live stream functionality built in, so you can sort of stream from any sort of live broadcast setup into the system. So we integrate with anything off the shelf really that exists already. Then there's a media library sort of vault sort of area. We're looking at integrating virtual tours and 3D and 2D interactive content, so lots of web content as well. I think Phil's absolutely right. Variety is everything, right? So the idea we've come with is how much can we pack in to this one platform to make it less of a webinar and more of like a full sort of journey that you can take people on. Yeah.
So Adrian, because from your point of view, you've been, as you said, you've been in the sort of more of the broadcasting field for longer than the events field, as it were. How do you differentiate the two, broadcast and events? What is the glitz and glamour that the broadcast brings?
Well, I think what's interesting is it's a bit of an education for brand clients. So when you're in broadcast, you're thinking about the audience all the time. You're thinking about what will the audience like, what will get good ratings, what will get recommissioned, all those kind of things. And then for brand, you need to sort of get that respect for the audience in the client's mind. So they need to think, who is my audience and what is the right platform to reach them on? So I think in order to have the ideal live event, it's those three things. Firstly, it's having that for the client, then which audience do you want to reach, and then which platform is best to do it. Then when you're thinking about that audience, how can we avoid Zoom fatigue as Phil said, bring a story to it, bring a narrative, bring bells and whistles, pre-record, whatever, but make it shorter. For goodness sake, make it shorter, please. And then in terms of respect for the platform, let's do things that are right for the platform. So if people are watching things on their mobile, they're not going to be interested in a sort of 3D or AR experience because they can't experience it. So if they're picking things up around and about, and they've got the kids, to pick up, and they've got food being delivered, and the cat's doing something in the corner that no one should be talking about, then we have to make sure that the platform is right and that the material that goes on that platform is fit for purpose. So it's those kind of things to keep in mind, I think.
Yeah, so it's not getting carried away with the technology; it's understanding the needs and the audience and the brief in the first place.
Yeah, but also the client message as well. They shouldn't get too carried away about being, all about that client message. It's thinking about the audience and what would they like to be, taking part in during that experience.
Yeah, changing your mindset at the beginning, understanding the audience and how they react. Matt, have you got anything to add at this point?
Yeah, I think just from an event point of view, the biggest challenges we've talked about is getting people to think differently, because we've gone from 8 hours of content and you're trying to they still want to cram everything into a broadcast. So I think it's a variety, it's everything we've just talked about there. But the one key thing for us is around the interaction. So whether that's you're bringing people in a live environment, whether it's pre-recorded or not, or we're creating stunts where we're actually able to go out on location and surprise someone and bring them in. All of that for us is creating a stronger connection with the audience, which has definitely helped us in recent months.
Right, okay, great.
Just to sort of pinpoint something as well. I think you can't overestimate or underestimate the importance of casting as well. People buy from people, right? So just as if you were going to a sales pitch or a meeting in person, you would want to put people that resonate with your audience, saying things that resonate with your audience as well. And often that kind of goes left by the wayside a bit, certainly in our world of B2B events, because we're dealing with a lot of corporations who, perhaps may not have the media training or may not have the sort of experience of being on screen and talking to people sort of when they can't even make eye contact or sort of shake hands. And so that's so vital, is to have people who know the format, who understand it, and who can actually engage an audience in that sort of way, in that sort of broadcast sense.
Yes, exactly. And I know, Phil, you feel very strongly about this, don't you? That you need to make sure you've got the right people presenting who know what they're doing, because it's a totally different skill.
100%, yeah. I mean, it is a very different skill set, and a professional host to bring your broadcast together. Someone who is capable of talking to camera, who can listen on an earpiece, who can interrogate or answer really pertinent questions of the presenter or the person that's on stage, and be the voice of the audience, and do all of that seamlessly and simultaneously. It's not a skill set that's inherent with pretty much 99% of the CEOs in this world that would normally stand up in front of an event. They'd be much better sat there being kind of interviewed for 20 minutes in an Andrew Marr style with a professional host that's going to tease out all those pertinent points that they want to make about their Q1 results or whatever it might be, or their new product launch. It's doing it in an intelligent way. And things like that, if they're done short and punchy, as Adrian says, in a spectacular way, are really engaging, and that's where, when it comes to obviously the way we move forward with broadcast events, the shared live experience, so to speak. So as people become back to kind of in person, you get an element of that, and you've got your small screen audience. Those moments, those shared experiences become marquee moments. So yes, it might be, the keynote for everybody, but if you're fortunate and you're the type of brand that Nick was talking about, where you may well be able to have an interview with Barack Obama. Well, do you know what? It doesn't matter if it's 2:00 in the morning, you're talking on a global platform. I'd get up for that if that was my company, and I'd listen. We've got to start thinking globally, because we're in a virtual space now, and it's not about 9 to 5 when you're talking about broadcast shows and broadcast events. So it's a very different mindset, and and that's why I say it's an exciting time ahead, because as agencies, you guys have got this opportunity to hold the hands and really excite brands and forward moving forward. We just want to make it look great.
But does this brings us into another a topic though that could be something that will rise up in the coming months is the skill sets that people have and the skill sets that they need to move into this arena. You know, I know DRPG is a fairly large employer, and you know you have a great recruitment process.
Yep.
What do you think you're going to have to start looking for? Because possibly, you know, we'll go to Adrian next, because you know Adrian will have been in this area for some time. What skill sets do you need?
First and foremost, it's the understanding of how effective creative communication. So you need to understand the audience, and then you need to understand how to translate that. And I think when we're looking at our teams, our live guys are experts at creating in the moment experiences in the room and making people feel absolutely amazing and can bring all those things to life. It's been a really hard transition for us to take the live teams into both virtual and broadcast. So all of our event managers who are used to delegate logistics, managing venues and dealing directly with delegates or the audience are now dealing with digital platforms, and we've created our own digital platform, and that comes with a world of pain and so many things that you can't control. So for us, that's a completely set of different disciplines that they've had to adapt to very quickly. And then the live producers who are used to creating in the room experiences and can look at everything in the room are now looking at everything through the lens and through a viewfinder and having to create light and shade. And as we've talked about there, thinking around the different variety of delivery. And so from a skill set point of view, everyone's had to make that transition. I think we have to be careful because we can dilute some of those specialisms because we're trying to get everyone to do everything because it's the position that we've been forced in to survive. But as we come out of it, there'll be new disciplines that will be required, I feel, for when we start to go to hybrid, because we'll have to start thinking about connectivity and dependencies, and IT that used to just be a service that most businesses needed internally is now coming to the fore for us in terms of how it's supporting our technology and overall delivery.
Right, okay. Adrian, over to you. Having come from more the broadcast world originally, how do you see this panning out?
I mean, 100% get professional talent if the broadcast matters. Definitely in full agreement with Phil on that. Starstruck, the name relates to talent because we started out doing talent-led TV shows. So we've always had this bee in our bonnet about a client coming to us maybe and saying, our CEO would love to do this whole broadcast and X, Y, and Z, which is fantastic, but you don't want to do that to your client. You don't want to make your CEO look rubbish. And also, like, a talent can be a pull as well. If there's budget, if you can afford a name, or you can even afford someone who has brings a bit of gravitas to the live, you will pull an extra audience into that live broadcast. And also, we had a story. I'm quite happy to share this story, but we had an experience where we were just about to go live, quite a major blue chip brand, and we obviously closed the door to the studio, ready to go live. Unfortunately, it cut the cable that was feeding the teleprompt. So the auto cue operator was sitting there going, and the presenter didn't have any auto cue. But because she was a seasoned presenter, a very, very well-respected talent with lots and lots of experience, she knew her script and she could just riff until we managed to realize that was a problem and we fixed it. So I think talent is an absolute investment that everyone should make where possible, because it really adds something to the broadcast.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Nick, I know you introduced that topic, but anything else to add, and then we'll go back to Phil?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say, it doesn't have to break the bank as well. There are plenty of people out there who do this professionally, who aren't necessarily sort of A or B list sort of talent, who can actually do a really compelling sort of piece on in front of an audience. I mean, for example, in our sort of gaming life, we look at a lot of live streamers who are talking to people every single day of the week and have a huge audience sometimes, have a very different way of doing it to maybe what's seen on TV and on sort of the major broadcasters, but a really compelling way of talking to their audiences. For certain brands, that can work really, really well, and having like an honest conversation. And you know what, as well, don't tell them, but their rates are really good too. So being creative and where you find people can be a great way as well of adding people in, motivational speakers even.
So really good tip. I think one of the concerns for EVCOM, of course, is a lot of our members are from the live event side, and I think there's going to be a steep learning curve for a lot of those people who have operated purely and manage that stress and all the things that can go wrong in a live environment. And now suddenly there's a whole nother element to take on board and learn. Phil, sorry, did you want to add something?
Yeah, it was also just to sort of throw in there that in terms of when you're filming a show and the skill sets that are required, obviously, the members of EVCOM that come from the film community, they've got an important role potentially to play here, as well as looking at TV, people that work in television. So, for example, when you think of a show, you think of a broadcast, your big widescreen, your money shot, your opening of comic relief is on screen for 4 seconds. And then you're into what we have here, which is kind of a 12, 15-inch film. So it's about how you frame 95% of the video content that engages you with the speaker, as opposed to, odd sets or bizarre lighting. And it's looking at television and film people that understand how to light a set, how to design a set. Because, like I said already, in the live environment, yeah, brilliant. You used to walk into the Excel or a hotel ballroom and you'd have a huge, massive 50-meter LED wall and it would look stunning. But when you're watching on a 13-inch laptop, it does nothing for you. So the way you bring your title sequences into your show need to be more televisual for your small screen audience, whereas when you get to hybrid, your in-person audience, they'll love that big wow moment again, and that kind of I was there and I saw this, and that's those people are really important moving forward, because as Nick was talking about, when we and Matt, when we get into a world where Boris lets us all out of the house again, for those of us that don't work in television anyway, then hybrid will be the way forward. Networking is something, we've all tried to do in some way or shape or form in the virtual space, but those serendipitous moments only happen in person, because that's how we naturally are and how we naturally act and react. They're far more natural, less forced. So the skill sets are going to be interesting, but it is thinking film and television coming into a hybrid world, and those skill sets don't exist right now, we need to bring that talent in and train up our existing resource. There's a world of freelancers out there that are chomping at the bit to get back in, learn new skills, become multi-talented, and it's our duty to get those back in as quickly as we can do. So it's an interesting time ahead, but you're absolutely right. Everyone's bang on in terms of kind of the people that are required. It's a change, but it's a great change.
And there are a few things that got touched on in that conversation just then. When we talk about events, we talk usually about the joy of being in a room with lots of people. So what are the tools that we can use to create a sense of connection and interactivity through a broadcast? How do we keep viewers engaged? How do we manage mistakes? How do we plan in pre-records? What are some things that people need to be thinking about to make sure that if they are doing a broadcast, it feels like there is audience engagement? Adrian, any suggestions?
Yeah, it goes back to the audience again, understanding the needs of the audience, scheduling that live at the right time, delving deep into their engagement is quite good. Maybe think about what you're doing in the pre-event period. How are you bringing that audience to the live show? How are you going to engage them? Maybe there's interactivity. This has worked really well for us, especially with some of the more corporate events. I think we always want to bring the audience way before the live show itself. Focus groups. Maybe we do sort of interactive polls. We've had CEOs responding to tweets live during the program, as we call it, a program event, if you like. Sort of really creating a three-dimensional relationship with your audience is the key, I think. Just if you think about some of the long-running TV shows that have been going for years, so the morning shows, sort of like Good Morning Britain, they were always pulling the audience in. Someone's messaged us, they've tweeted us about this. I'm now going to respond, and then everyone who's watching is involved in your comments. So I think bringing the audience in is really important. We've all got Zoom fatigue now, so let's think about the audience and how we can involve everyone.
Great. Now, Matt and Nick, going over to you, because I believe you'll both have something to say about the gamification of broadcasts and events. Is that a possible tool to get people's undivided attention and sort of staying put for longer? Nick, because I know you do this in your business.
Yeah, sure. It definitely is effective. It can't just be a sort of one-way conversation. The minute you can get people talking to each other, across the Gulf and interacting with each other, or however that is, then it's going to be a really effective way to actually get them to listen. Because that's always the big thing with virtual events, especially, is attention. We've got our email inboxes just there. Mine's hidden behind some windows. We've got notifications coming in. It's chaos, so we've got to grab people and make them care.
Yeah.
So a great way I've seen it done, actually, in a sort of different sector, in theatre, actually, there's an American company who said, okay, we're doing virtual theatre. Can we actually make it like the audience actually a bit more involved? So they had the idea of doing a choose your own adventure style theatre production. So every sort of now and again in the theatre show, which was live streamed, they would ask the audience, okay, what do you want the actors to do next? In an intermission period or something like that. Does he go take the left door or the right door? Does she, say yes or say no? And then that would sort of decide where they went on in that journey in the theatre. So you can be super, super creative. People are going to have fun. It's not just necessarily about a corporate presentation. It doesn't have to be boring. Make it fun.
Yeah, it's just freeing the imagination, isn't it? I remember there used to be books like that where you could choose the ending. Yeah. Matt, anything to add?
Yeah, just building on both of those things, our biggest success has been when we've done campaigns that have ran up to an event and you can create some excitement and energy. People can send in user-generated content, which you can use as part of the overall show. But the element of competition can run throughout that period. And then we're finding that rather than have just a one-day event, you can break it up throughout the course of a week and create energy around it and use the social channels, whether that's workplace or whether it's external social channels. We can create a lot of energy around it. And we're finding that with a combination of gamification, however you choose to deploy that, works really, really well.
Right. Okay, great. Now, one of the things that has come up in lots of conversations when I've been talking to people on the phone about where they're trying to go in the future is the conundrum of budgets, because if we're going forward with hybrid events or sort of more broadcast style, there is that concern that from a client perspective you've got a budget and that delivers you a live event. Is there an additional budget to now do a hybrid or broadcast, or is there some jiggery pokery that can be done to minimize cost over here? How are budgets going to go forward with this? Adrian, do you have any advice or suggestions of where this might go?
Well, I think the key thing is that clients on the whole don't see why it's so expensive to do virtual events versus physical ones. And pretty much every single budget we put in gets questioned a lot more, I think, than when we do physical activations, purely because the client, there's a lot of hidden things now because everyone has to work remotely, especially with the situation we're in. But also there's a lot of tech. We had to build this, what we call control room in the cloud. So therefore, we basically built a TV gallery, a TV control room, which, needs to drive these live events. Whereas a client could turn up to, as you were saying before, Excel or a theatre or something like that, and see all their money being spent. They see the lights, they see the set, they see, everyone sitting in the control room. So I think that's the first thing, is that the clients are automatically coming in saying it's too expensive. Secondly, we've had to add in, and we've been lucky enough to be able to do this because we are a social agency, adding in other takeaways. So for example, if you can't see the live event, what snackable bits can you take away from it? Can you do live clipping? Can you do community management? Can you do social media? Can you do a lot more of the package around the live event? So you do the pre and post content, highlights, VTs, those kind of things as part of your budget now, rather than just it's a one and done. We turn up 8 p.m. By 10 p.m. we've all had a few drinks. Well done, agency. See you later. So it's a very different world now from a budget's point of view, for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot more of a sort of a broader communication strategy, and that's what they're paying for. Phil, I know you have views on this.
Yeah, I do, and I mean, I touched on it briefly earlier because, and it's been mentioned already by Nick and Matt separately. You know, the most successful events are actually campaigns now, and they have a much longer shelf life. So it's repurposing the travel budget, it's repurposing the hotel budget, it's bringing in digital marketing into the event channel, so that you're bringing in a broader breadth of that budget. I think there's another unique angle to look at this as well as we move forward in terms of how corporates will want to work in the future, because they've seen the success of doing some events virtually wholly. And they may want to continue that, but in reality, you know, they're going to need to start repurposing their office space, because they're not going to have as many people on the 5th floor of a huge building in Victoria. So potentially, to help their budgets and help their events, it might be they need to start looking at either pop-up studios that they could hire or rent, a bit like we're in today, or, for example, you know, a semi-permanent or a permanent installation. You know, maybe they need to start thinking about ripping out the old video conferencing suite and putting in a broadcast studio, so you then get back onto high brand values when you're doing a small internal comms piece, rather than getting 30 people flying from all over Europe to a hotel in London. Sorry, hospitality, but you've been bailed out, we haven't. You know, fundamentally, they'll be able to deliver those events from their own studio. So actually, their return on investment, rather than hiring out meeting rooms and meeting spaces and flying people from over Europe for small events, they can deliver it much more professionally, much more on brand. As we also move forward and kind of bigger global companies, you know, they have the ability then to hold a small little internal comms meeting in the morning face-to-face with their employees. And then that studio could be, you know, flip the LED wall to a green screen in the afternoon, and they could appear on stage in San Diego with their corporate client. So, you know, as agencies, you've got the ability now, and hopefully, you know, through production, to hold these people's hands and say, look, think about your budget differently. How can you deliver great experiences in a different way? And yeah, maybe using office space rather than venue hire has a bit of short-term cost to it, but the long-term gain over the next 2 or 3 years is huge, and the additional money can go into the experience and the production.
It's interesting, isn't it, how it's all going to be sliced and diced as we go through, and people get more experienced in understanding how that all works. I'm just conscious a little bit of time, and I've got another question at the end, which I need all your input. But before we go to that, there's been a question put through from Christina, which is about the skill subject, is have any of you contributed to reskilling your events workforce? This probably might only be for Matt. You've got to get everybody to do a little bit of everything in pivoting to virtual. Did you use external companies to support you with this transition, i.e. reskilling and upskilling your operational teams to run production, broadcast, support in data analytics, etc.? So did you bring in external help to train, or
we didn't. We were fortunate. We didn't, because we were fortunate that we had a digital agency in-house and we've got a film agency in-house, so we pulled on those resources. But still wasn't easy, because they were equally learning. You're learning, they're trying to learn live, we're trying to learn digital. And where we drew on external was more from the broadcast side of things, because it was TV production, and we work with BT and BT Sports, so we drew an awful lot on their experiences with our teams, and that helped us significantly in the early days. But what I would say is the digital side of things has probably caught us out far more than anything else, because digital's moving at a rapid pace. Broadcast was probably established, and still to this day, I think we're caught out by connectivity, by CDNs, if I've got that right, by all of the different hosting options. And that's probably where we've had our biggest challenges. And everybody is learning at the same time, including the people that are developing the platforms and are writing the code for this stuff.
Yeah.
Just to quickly sort of step in there, just to agree, digital is massively expensive, and we've like grown our digital team by like 1,000%, you know, in the last year and a half, largely because of this virtualization of events. And not only that, but, you know, the competitive landscape has totally changed on that side of things too. We're not just competing with events agencies or experiential agencies or ad agencies anymore. We're competing against, you know, Silicon Valley unicorns, well-funded tech startups who have, you know, 100 people in their dev team from day one because they've got millions to spend. So it's a really not level playing field. So it's been a real interesting challenge to kind of meet that, I suppose.
Yeah.
Just adding to that, I do think that they don't know how to communicate as well either. So events are all about communication and possibly broadcast as well. Everybody has quite a lot of transparency. It doesn't seem the same in the digital world, and I'm probably putting a blanket thing there that I probably shouldn't, and I'll get shot for it. However, it's been hard.
Yeah, I mean, the model of, you know, tech startups is one size fits all. For events, largely, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a time and a place, but, you know, I think it's best tool for the job in every situation, right?
Well, you know, I think exciting on one level, but sort of terrifying on another level for a lot of people. So we've got a little bit of time left, and one of the questions I did want to ask was, you know, looking at your own work or looking at, you know, whisper at competitors or other brands. Are there any projects that you've worked on in this sphere that you think are interesting, you've learned, you've got challenged and you've got over them? Or is there any work out there that you've seen that you really admire that you'd like to share with our audiences, you know, things worth looking at so people can get an idea of what good is? Adrian, go on, we'll start with you.
Okay, I'll give you two examples. One from us. My favorite, because I'm a bit of a geek, my favorite tech one was bringing together the final departures of the 747s for British Airways, because that had to be done on quite a small budget, but also the airport was pretty much closed. No one could get access anywhere. It was very hard to do any kind of paperwork. We had COVID, illness and things like that to also contend with, which is something that, of course, we need to sort of raise. But everyone pulled together, and we managed to get a blend of different cameras, so proper broadcast cameras, webcams, people on their phones filming, bring it all together into this kind of massive control room, and make a program that was really, really interesting to watch. And of course, quite sad because it's the final Boeing 747s leaving Heathrow for the last time 2 years ahead of schedule. So that was a really poignant kind of broadcast, because it really tapped into what this period of time is all about with coronavirus, but also brought the audience in because all of their memories were reflected, and it was such a wonderful aircraft. So that was a lovely broadcast. So that's my favorite that we've done. But my favorite that other agencies have done or brands have done have definitely got to be the American Music Awards, where the award nominees were actually involved in the broadcast, even though they couldn't be there in person. So there was a camera crew at each of the nominees, and when they won, the audience saw the award presented to the winner. And I love that idea of surprise and delight. And I would say to anyone who is offering live events to your clients, to say, what can we bring? Where can we bring a little bit of physicality to it? Maybe it's something where there is a competition and someone wins, and actually knock on the door and there's a COVID-safe crew outside presenting you with that, and surprise and delight them. So I really think that for me taps into, okay, well, we can actually sit back, enjoy this award ceremony. It's not just going to be a list of winners with, those kind of Zoom graphics and things, four-way windows and whatnot. And actually, oh, look, there's some surprise guests, and I wonder, I never knew their house was like that. So that's a win. So they're my two sort of favorites from the last 12 months or so. Yeah.
The glitz and the glamour, Adrian. There you go again. You've presented it. Yeah. Big budget, though.
Yeah.
Anyone next? Volunteer?
I'll go next.
Well, from our side, obviously, we're kind of more brought in by, the agency or the client to deliver the event. And I think probably the one that I would highlight that we were involved with that came across exceptionally well was we were brought in by BBC Scotland to deliver their Hogman New Year's Eve show. And the concept was to deliver a hybrid event. Unfortunately, COVID put pace to the in-person audience. But what we did is we managed to kind of work with a great set design and 3 stages that enabled us to create what would have been for the in-person audience sort of movement, emotion and interactivity, where you had, you know, your audience wall and a presentation, you had virtual speakers coming in from the US, you know, the bands, you know, Deacon Blue and Amy McDonald were in the studio being interviewed, and you had a couple of other people coming in. And it was a really lovely, punchy 1 hour. What great content, what great engagement, great stories to tell. Okay, it's not corporate, it's more entertainment, but the concept of investing in proper set stage, proper design, proper event production on a television show was a really interesting way. And what we're finding in the television world is actually there's a real kind of dual effort going on, because they're learning from the events industry as well, because they need to deliver hybrid events as television studios begin to come back in smaller numbers. They're curating their own shows as events as much as we're trying to, in the event world, curate television shows as events. So it's an interesting dichotomy. But yeah, that would be the highlight, really. Click on YouTube, tick. You can.
Thanks, Phil. Matt, how about you?
Yeah, so I think there's lots of stuff to be inspired by. We're inspired by, from a content point of view, some great stuff that Apple do, and that's all very visual, and you'd expect that of that brand, but they do some stuff really well. Katy Perry performance on, I think it was America's Got Talent, possibly, when it was used, the first use of extended reality was excellent, and that inspired an awful lot of people in the event industry into, okay, this is how we can bring it to life through broadcast, and that was great. And then personally, for an event that we've delivered, it was normally a physical event across a number of days, and it all had to go virtual. And it was predominantly an internal audience for around 20-odd thousand people. And we had to turn it on its head. We did a business session, but then we engaged with the audience to find out what they wanted. And what they actually wanted was to sit at home and watch it with friends and family. And then we went on a journey very quickly to create this show with lots of highs and lows and lots of segments. And some fantastic hosts, all the things we've been talking about, we implemented. And it was kind of a mix of Noel's Christmas presents, where we were knocking on doors and surprising people with incredible celebrities at their front door, handing them their reward, which was wonderful. Meets the Generation Game, because we did all sorts of different activities, from Wipeout to the Generation Game. And then the one show for that magazine-style glossy interviews, that, you know, that really help you bring content to life. And we learned so much there. But it was great because we knew we were doing it with the audience in mind, because we'd reached out and talked to them. And the big deal was, we want families to watch this and to see what we do at work.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that a lot of people forget. You know, it was brought to our attention when we did our awards that, you know, I was doing them, you're going into their personal time, but you're in their home. And I had forgotten that. Yeah. And we had a little incident with, you know, language. But I've, you know, I have to confess, I had forgotten, it was in one of the films, and I had forgotten that people might have their kids watching. So that was a lesson learned, because you just presume, you know, it's work, because to us it was still work. And this is a work environment, but yeah, I learned that one the hard way. Nick, how about you?
Yeah, I think there are some massive compilations of Zoom moments from 2020 that we'll be watching for a while. What's been a cool event? I think, you know, one from the wild, because it's good to hear from other people, and then one from us. In the wild, there was a really cool installation actually done by a company, where a team of four collaborators actually, and this was they were lighting designers. And so what they did, they were like, well, we can't do any live shows. We want to sort of connect with people and put on a live performance. How do we do it? They rented a space in Berlin, a big sort of warehouse space, put a bunch of lights up, pre-programmed all this sort of stuff, built a web page you could log into to kind of trigger lights and sort of play it to music. And then basically as a visitor, you could log into the page, you know, wait for your slot to come up. And then you had this full control of this amazing visual sort of light set to a Paul van Dyk track. So really, really, really cool event. Had tons of people sign up, twice as many signed up as there were slots available. Completely, you know, not done for profit, just done to entertain people in lockdown and to kind of give back a bit and give people experiences they couldn't have normally. And that's, I think, really, really key. And a quick one from us. We work a lot with Airbus, and typically those are corporate events, B2B events, but for the HR department, they wanted to connect with new audiences. So we took them to Gamescom. Last time Gamescom was up and running. And we basically worked with the League of Legends gaming team. So they got an all-female League of Legends gaming team, had sort of 5v5 battles on set, you know, in Gamescom itself, with this sort of little stage area. But also that was all live streamed to Twitch and done on YouTube as well. And so we had people who could sort of challenge the team who were sort of not necessarily into space. We had some event hack moments, also presentations from Airbus and HoloLens stuff, all done for a low budget, crucially, because budget is king always. But going back to Phil's original point, it was variety. There was different stuff happening every 20 minutes. There was different people up and talking, different things to do, all gamified, all fun. So that was a real sort of highlight of early hybrid stuff that we've done, I suppose.
Really interesting stuff, and I think the thing that I take away from all of this is that it's audience first, and what do you need to do to keep them engaged and make that happen first and foremost. And one of the things you touched on there, Nick, about the music and lights was a question that we unfortunately don't have time for, which is all about the monetization of these things, you know, and how do you get an audience to pay, or how do you get sponsors to support so that they can see the value? Oh, Adrian's going to jump in with an answer.
Really quick, I'll make it just offer them a package, offer them more, give them social media exports, give them other things they can take away, give them something more than just a live event. If you think beyond the live event, you'll be able to sort of get partnerships with sponsors, because they'll be interested in that, because they can own more of the campaign that, you know, the guys talked about at the beginning of this. Right, so it's topping and tailing it and making sure it has a longer life and more elements to it. Okay, good tip. So that's for Candice. Not quite as full an answer as we might have had for time-wise, so I'm sorry about that. But yes, we've run over, but it's a great subject, it really is. And I'd like to thank you all. Thank you to Phil, Adrian, Matt and Nick. It's been a really good chat. Thanks ever so much for your time. And just to remind people that all of this will be on our website from tomorrow lunchtime. Thank you for joining us, and we'll hope to see you again next month. All right, bye for now.